toward the sermon. And as I now look around this room, I cannot help but wonder if we might not know a thing or two about what Jesus and his followers were feeling in John 11. Someone need only to sit in on the sharing of our joys and concerns at Kingston to know that in the last few months there are families in our congregations who have undergone major surgeries, who have mourned and lost loved ones, who have found themselves in difficult circumstances that they never planned on for their life. There are those who have spent years fighting on behalf of justice for people they love with few results. Some who have experienced the challenges and joys of babies being born. Some that have experienced the uncertainty that comes along with life transitions and church transitions. So as we hear the probing questions and the painful doubts of Jesus' followers in the story, can we not also almost hear ourselves echo their cries from time to time? Jesus, where are you? Jesus, why is this happening? Jesus, will you be faithful to me? Even though we are Christians, people who profess the goodness and faithfulness of God, I am convinced that when we turn around and take a look at this world, or some of the situations and circumstances that we face, it is difficult not to question that goodness and faithfulness of God from time to time. And we've all probably received similar responses to our questioning, responses that feel a little cliched. Responses like, God has a plan, or God uses all of our circumstances for good. Now, while on some level these responses may in fact be very true and very well-intentioned, it is a lot easier to accept them when things are going well for us. It is easy to know or to imagine that God might use the good things that happen to us for good. It's a no-brainer, right? But these responses become a lot harder to swallow when the things which face us are so big or put us into such vulnerable positions that we really have to work to try to fathom what kind of good could come out of it. Maybe it's just a lot easier to think about all the bad things that might happen instead. The followers of Jesus in our story are so caught up in everything they have to lose, and in everything that they've already lost, that it is difficult for them to imagine how any good could come from their pain. So what is the response of Jesus in this story? How did he address the concerns of his followers? Every interaction Jesus has with his followers is an attempt to tell them that there is something they are still not getting, even after every sign he has done. At the very beginning of the story, the first thing we hear Jesus say to the disciples in response to the news of Lazarus is this: this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Several verses later, as the disciples are attempting to maneuver their way out of going back to Bethany, Jesus says, Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad I was not there, so that you may believe. See, though his disciples do not seem to understand, Jesus is suggesting that the reason he is allowing them to enter into such a vulnerable position is because he is going to use it to show them who he really is. It isn't enough for Jesus that they follow him around, that they learn from his teachings, and that they profess allegiance to him if they do not also understand what it means for their lives that he is the Son of God. This truth is just too important for their faith, for the disciples and Jesus' followers not to get it. But what did it mean? What did it mean for his followers that Jesus was the Son of God? And what does it mean for our present lives? Jesus tells Martha, I am the resurrection and life now. If you believe this, you will see the glory of God. And when Mary comes to him in her brokenness, Jesus is so moved that he enters into her pain with her and weeps. But he doesn't stop there. Jesus is compelled to go to the tomb in order to raise Lazarus in one final attempt to show his followers that their faith is not in vain. That Jesus really is the one who enters into the pain, uncertainty, and death of his followers and leads them through it into new life. Jesus' dominion over death in these verses is the final proof of his divinity to his followers. It is not accidental that this last sign of Jesus takes place directly before Jesus is led to his death. For it is in the death of Jesus that we find our message for today. It is in the death of Jesus that the God of this universe enters into the brokenness of our human condition and yields to it. It is in the image of Christ on the cross that we find the Son of God beaten and bruised in order to bring about our healing. And this death of Jesus embodies for us the very truth he reveals to his followers in the story when he raises Lazarus, because Jesus' death does not end there either. It is not simply that Jesus enters into our pain and dies there. His death is made complete in his resurrection. It is in his dominion over death that all of our fear and shame and defeat and sin are overturned. It is because of his dominion over death that he has dominion over everything else. His resurrection is what gives us new life and a hope to live into. We aren't so far off from the disciples, or Martha, or Mary, or Lazarus. We all experience painful circumstances. That is the reality of living in a world that is permeated by sin and brokenness. And in those moments that we experience, we often pause to consider if our faith really means anything, if Jesus is who he says he is, and if he is going to be faithful to us. But perhaps Jesus has already demonstrated the full extent of his faithfulness to us. And in our moments of vulnerability and uncertainty and sorrow and shame, Jesus uses them to reveal himself as the one who enters into all of our pain and all of our loss and overturns it. He is the one, he reveals himself to be the only one who can return everything we've lost and use it for good. Perhaps God does not keep all of our difficult circumstances from happening to us because what he has to show us through them is just too important for us not to get it. Perhaps it is precisely in the tragedy of our pain, sin, and death that we find the source of all faith, hope, and love. Amen.